Um, my name's David Gauntler. I'm here to host Ashoka and Lego Foundation Google Hangout, which is called How Tech and Video Games Are Shaping the Future of Learning. So today it's all about how we can improve education for kids and everyone in the future, the role that technology would play in this. Does technology play a role at all? Should we be thinking about different things? If we are going to use technology, because people do use technology in everyday life a lot these days, what skills do we need to give kids to deal with that? What should we be equipping them to be able to do in the future? What tools can we use? In particular, we've got to kind of focus on video games. Video games are a way that we can build better learners and help kids to engage with emotional and social issues, as well as obviously having fun with technology. We're in favor of that too. We've got a great panel of experts who are here with us today, so I'm going to go along the line, and I might get it in the exactly reverse order because I'm looking at a mirror image, but I think if we're going this way on, you can't see that, on what I've got here, I think we're going to start with Jordan Shapiro. Give us a wave. There's Jordan. He writes for Forbes on education and technology. He writes about game-based learning and parenting for Forbes as well. He teaches at the College of Liberal Arts at Temple University, Philadelphia. We're really pleased to have him here. He's got loads of followers on Twitter. Hopefully some of them are here too. Hello to you. We've got, next along, we've got Jen Cotler-Clark. I'm trying to work out what order we're going in. Give us a wave, Jen. There's Jen. She's Vice President of Research and Evaluation at the Sesame Workshop in New York. We've got Jan von Meppen. He's from Luding. He's giving us a wave. He's the overall game concept designer for Luding, who are a company that produce immersive games that are meant to help kids with their learning. We'll hear a lot more about that. He's the guy behind Professor S that you may have heard of, the time-traveling professor. And we've also got Bo Stjern-Thompson, who's the Director of Research and Learning for the Lego Foundation, one of the co-organizers of this. He's there. Has he given us a wave yet? There he goes. Give us a wave, Bo. There we are. And we'll be hearing from them too. Okay. So we're going to crack straight on with it. I won't give you long biographies about everybody. I thought I would start by asking, basically, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What's wrong with education? We probably, most of us here, think that there are some things wrong with education and how learning is organized in societies. Around the world, we're not thinking of just the US or any one country in particular. We're thinking of different places. But we tend to think there's a problem. What is that problem? Let's have a bit of a roundup. Shall we start with Jan, who's biggest on my screen at the moment? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just muted my microphone, but I'm unmuted now. Well, it's hard really to pinpoint anything when talking about what's wrong with education. I've spent quite a lot of time in primary schools over the last 5 years whilst developing this game, Professor S, and there are a number of things that can be improved. But I think on a more general note, I think that that the kinds of skills that are being taught at school are no longer really relevant to the kinds of skills that people need when they start working. And again, I'm just talking now from the point of view of an employer, because I don't really when I look at hiring people for Luding, of course, I make sure that they have the skills that I need them to have in order to do programming or design or whatever it is that I'm hiring them for. But I'm not really that interested anymore in which school they went to or whether or not they even went to school. I'm more interested in the results that they show. If they have examples of their work that I can verify as something that would be valuable to us as a company. And you know, a lot of the skills that are being taught at school, and you know, again, I'm talking out of my own experiences, are skills that require you to repeat things you know, that you've learned from a book, and they're not really problem-solving skills. They're not skills that you need when you start working on a project with somebody else. You know,
Yeah,
when you're coding a website,
absolutely.
or when you so you know, it's kind of become a little bit meaningless. Yeah, and also there's a bit of an education deflation going on at the moment. I mean, everybody's got a degree. You know, it doesn't really say anything about the skills of the individual. You know, so. Yeah,
And employers never say that they just want somebody that can repeat something that they've read in a book. So we'll carry on with a quick roundup. Thanks for that, Jan. That's great. Shall we go to Jen?
Yeah, I
We're
think
talking about
one of the
what's wrong
things
with
that,
education.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the things, and I particularly am interested in the preschool children, and in preschool classrooms, what's so obvious to me when I go into these settings is that children have such different skills that they're coming in with. And when you have so many children, you have up to 17, 18 children with one lead teacher and an assistant teacher, and each of those children have different levels of understanding, different needs, different things that they're good at, things that they're struggling with, and trying to reach all of them at their own level is just really difficult for even the best teacher to try to do. And I think that's a real opportunity for game-based learning and for using technology to really individualize experiences for children.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll carry on the whip round. Bo, what's wrong with education? Lego Foundation's done lots of work on this.
Thank you, David. Well, I think in terms of technology, first and foremost, I think that technology has given us the opportunity to get access to the vast amount of information, which basically has led to a requirement to rethink education, because education was previously about transmitting knowledge from one generation to another. So I think we really see the opportunity of technologies now to say, now the purpose of education is about learning. It's about inspiring children to be lifelong creative learners. And the things I remember from my education were things that I worked on in projects that I was passionate about, whether I was playing music, I was doing a project or a movie, I was doing my own projects. I think when technologies and information becomes vastly available, it provides this opening for you to customize and more playful approach to learning. And the opportunity is also, as we see it, that there's this kind of false dichotomy created in society between play and learning. Like, play is learning, and with technologies that are available right now, the opportunity to experiment with new technologies and interact also socially with technologies, that's really the opportunity for education to be more playful. So I would say there's certainly something wrong about the ambitions we have with education right now, because they're more about education than about learning.
Great, thank you very much. Last but not least, let's turn to Jordan with the same question. What's wrong with education? Do we really need to fix anything?
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to agree with what everyone else said before me, because I think they're all great points, and I want to pick up especially on something that Bo just said about this dichotomy between play and learning, because I think it's important that we remember there's lots of education that's working fantastic, and there's lots of great teachers, but in general, I think kind of the general dialogue and the general language we use, these kinds of dichotomies, are problematic, and I think, you know, most of the metaphors that we use when we talk about education are metaphors of production, right? So they become about outcomes, like, you know, factory outcomes, or they become media. We use media metaphors more now than factory metaphors, right? We talk about content, right? We talk about the importance of content, right? And we get rigorous about these things. and we have a kind of rigor that's about repetition rather than, as Bo said, what we really need is a rigor that's about creativity, a rigor that's about play, creating rigorous structures that make sure we offer students the opportunities to explore and learn on their own, right? The best teaching is the teaching that puts the tools in the hands of students so that they can learn by themselves, not that tries to give knowledge to students. Knowledge is easy to come by if you have all the right tools to find it, right? And that's what education, in my opinion, should be doing.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. We're also just being joined by, I think, Jessica Belinsky. There she is. Is that her? Actually, I can see her face. She may move in a moment. I don't think that's
okay.
Hi.
Apologies. I'm not sure how we'll do here. My Mac Airbook just completely crashed, which it's ironic that we're in a technology discussion here. So I've pulled out the very old MacBook. So we'll see how we do here.
Okay, we'll see how technology itself rises to the challenge. Okay, so we'll say hello to Jessica. She's the founder of If You Can. She's now the Chief Impact Officer of Adaptive Health Systems, which is a company that's actually focused on making social and emotional kind of learning games. It's great to see you here, Jessica. We were just doing a quick roundup about basically what's wrong with education. Why are we even talking about trying to fix education with technology? What do you see the main problem with education as it now stands is?
Yeah, you know, in my view, I think, and this may sound very heretical, but I think we need to look more broadly than just building good learners or great learners, but really look at building thriving children. So, you know, when we look at it from that view, I think we have to, you know, look at more, you know, comprehensive skills and really look at what does the research say that builds thriving children. And, you know, that, no surprise coming from me, but indeed are social emotional learning skills like, you know, how do we build empathy? How do we collaborate? How do we persevere through challenges? And now that we know that these skills are not just very strong arbiters of academic success, but also, in fact, you know, life success, how do we ensure that they become a very fundamental part of education? And I think technology, indeed, you know, as a tool, as a scalable tool, can play a very, very meaningful role in that.
I had a technology problem there. Sorry, can you hear me? Somebody say yes. I had a technology problem. I'm back. So we're all battling with technology slightly. As far as I can tell, Jessica stopped speaking. Sorry. So we got a quick bit from all of you there about sort of giving us a bit of a handle about what you think the problems might be, and you've all mentioned about technology. So that's a good start. I don't know how much introduction I did. I'll just say who I am. I'm David Gauntlet. I work at the University of Westminster. I wrote a book called Making is Connecting, amongst other things. And we're joined here in this hangout today by loads of people that you can't see. 160 people online said that they would be coming along. Other people might come along without clicking the RSVP thing. So we're very pleased to see you all here today, even though we can't see you. But we can have questions from you. You can enter questions in the Google Hangout chatty bit, or you can tweet questions using hashtag #PlayToLearn. So I'll definitely be taking questions from people a bit later on. First of all, I'm going to be asking a few more questions. I hope we're all back on now. You guys all nod to show that everything's working okay. We're doing okay. Good. Sorry. I actually went and opened something else in the same window. A crazy mistake to make. Don't do that. Technology is so hard. What can you do? So the next thing along would be if we think about thriving children, which Jessica said there. Thriving is a really great word, I think, but people don't always think about technology in terms of thriving children, do they? when we think about thriving children, you think about kids playing in the fields, making things with sticks, often being outdoors. And of course, you can be outdoors with technology. But to jump quite quickly to the more controversial kind of question about it, why do we need technology at all? Why, if we're thinking about our children flourishing, shouldn't we be encouraging them to use technology less? Part of that question is, obviously, what can technology really do that's actually good for kids, not just occupying their time, but doing actual good for children? And if we could have an example that each of you could think of, that'd be really good. So it's not abstract, but actual, something good for children that technology can do. I'll start picking somebody at random with Jen, if you can have a go at that question.
Yeah, well, I think this whole issue of the medium is the message, and the and I think that's just wrong. It's the message is the message, and technology is a tool, and it really matters how you use it. And you can use it to learn all sorts of things, and you can use it for all, for things that aren't helpful at all either. One of the things that we're really excited about recently is we've just created a whole initiative around, sorry, my phone's ringing, of course, the one time. We just started a whole initiative around executive function and self-regulation, and oftentimes technology is blamed for making hyperactive children and that it's taking away from all sorts of things. But in fact, we've demonstrated, and there's going to be some research coming out, that children who use video or technology to learn these skills can actually do better. So we have an app that we recently launched called the Cookie Monsters Challenge, and it teaches children all sorts of self-regulation skills, and that is something that technology is usually blamed for interfering with.
Okay, to make it more concrete, can you tell us what you mean by self-regulation skills? Reminding you, of course, fifth graders really know what self-regulation skills are, but we've got a bunch of fifth graders watching this apparently, so in words that even a fifth grader can understand, with no discredit to fifth graders who are very, very smart. Right. Smarter than us, we know.
So, well, Cookie Monster is the perfect example. Cookie Monster has very little self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to monitor your own behavior, so to wait in long lines, to not eat all the food in front of you, to wait for dessert to have the food that you want, to exercise when you're supposed to get up and go to school on time. So all of these things that are very important for lifelong learning, in order to sit in your chair, to pay attention to your teacher, even when you're bored. All of those skills are part of self-regulation, and self-regulation really is at the core of being school ready and having relationships with other children, to learn how to make friends. All of those skills require that you're able to regulate your own behavior. So we are teaching Cookie Monster how to do that, and giving him lots of strategies about how to chill out even when he wants to be very impulsive.
Okay, so in the game, kids teach Cookie Monster how to do these things.
Well, in this game, in this game, there's all sorts of different skills. So it's about flexibility and thinking. So he'll say, when you see the pig, don't touch it. And usually people assume you touch anything on screen, or make sure when you see Cookie Monster touch the red button and not the blue button. Whereas usually you'd see Cookie Monster, he's blue, you'd want to touch the blue button. So it's that flexibility in thinking and teaching children to really pay attention, listen to instructions. And so the game is similar to, I don't know if any of you have played this, and this is appropriate for fifth graders, even though the name of the app is not great, but it's called the Moron Test. And I don't know if any of you've played it on your tablet, but it basically makes you think critically and flexibly. And so we did an adaptation of that for preschool children.
Really interesting, thank you. And that helps me remember what that bit of educational jargon about self-regulation means, because I always forget those kind of terms. But now I know it's not Cookie Monster. I can think of Cookie Monster. It's
Well,
not
Cookie
that.
Monster's learning. He's learning.
Well, of course he's learning. Of course. But, like, we can all help him learn as well. I like that too. Okay, good. So moving along, can I ask Jordan the same kind of question, which is about technology, and if we can actually think of some concrete examples of technology which can help with these kind of things.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to take issue with the question, because no, the technology is not good for kids, right? Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have technology, but technology itself is not good for kids, and in the same way that blackboards are not good for kids. If they sit there and bang their head against them, blackboards are useless, right? That's dangerous. But let's also remember that the blackboard is a technology for learning, and it's a really effective one. So when technology enables us to do what we want to do better, when it's a tool, it works fantastic. And to give you a concrete example, David, I'll just use this Hangout, right? If I was sitting on the internet having a Hangout in order to just have a loud, angry argument with all of you, that would not be a very good use of technology. But the fact that it can bring a bunch of us from totally different parts of the world together to have an intelligent conversation, this is fantastic. And I know we're not kids, but we are all learning from each other, and the people watching are hopefully learning from us too. And this is an example how it's not the technology that's good. The technology is simply the tool that enables us to do what we do well.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of meant to be my starting point, that I think especially for parents, we've kind of learned to be wary of technology. We know that companies are frequently trying to sell us technology-based toys for our kids, and you kind of instinctively think, oh, you know, do I really need it to be doing all these things? An obvious contrast is with Lego, for example. We're all familiar from our own childhoods with something like Lego. It doesn't beep, it doesn't do anything, you know. You have to do things with it, and you can create whatever worlds into your own imagination. And we tend to be kind of worried about those technologies which seem to present a whole world to kids and just expect them to do things with it, press bits of it, or whatever. You know what I mean?
And I think we should be. I think we should be worried about those technologies that are for the sake of technology, and tools that allow us to be better people and make a better world. And when they're tools that make us to be, we should not be scared at all of tools that make us a better world, but tools that are just exist for the sake of tools, we should all be scared of them getting put in our hands of children.
Exactly. So maybe we can turn to Jan in terms of looking for examples of you know, uses of technologies where we might think, oh, excellent, that does seem to be a good thing for my kids. Can we pluck one out of the air? Possibly a thing that you've made yourself, Jan. That would be
well, actually, I actually tend to agree with Jordan. I'm not a massive fan of technology just for technology's sake. I mean, we're a technology company, and we're using technology to you know, to transmit learning content, but technology is really incidental. It could be anything. And there's a bit of a confusion about the term as well, I think, because the way it's used in this discussion, I think it's meant to mean computers and tablets and smartphones and things, right? But technology is also this, that like a piece of paper and a pen, right? I can use that to transmit learning content. So, but if we're just talking about computers, I think, yeah, I agree with Jordan that they're tremendously helpful and very powerful tools when it comes to transmitting knowledge, but they can also be very destructive if used wrongly. You know, I can, and yes, I mean, we designed a bit of technology which I can show you here. We've made this game, Professor S, which works with a custom piece of hardware, which is a little time machine, a time portal, with which the children in the classroom can communicate with some characters from the story that we've invented about you know, a traveling professor who together with his assistant Jeanette is stuck in the past, and he needs the kids to help them return to the present, and so the children then start communicating with this device, with the characters, and there's a dialogue that ensues from that, and out of that dialogue, then there's a story that's created, like an overarching narrative that lasts for the entire school year. But we actually try to only use this technology in these devices where it really makes sense. So the computers are very good at certain things, like, for example, doing research. Jordan had mentioned it earlier that you basically have the entire world's knowledge at your fingertips these days. If you want to know the answer to anything, you can just Google it and it will be there. Of course, you need to then know how to discern good information from bad information. And this is one of the single most useful things that I have learned during my entire educational career, if for want of a better term. The learning how to actually be able to tell what's good information and what's not. So, and this is something that we're trying to convey by just training them and looking at how can we. Because it's quite intangible. It's hard to say what makes a good piece of information and what makes a bad piece of information. But somehow we all can, and this is something that we're attempting to convey through Professor S and through the use of technology. But we're not actually doing it. We're not relying on the technology to do that for us. That's the content does that, and the story, and the way in which the learning content is transmitted through the story. That's how we're conveying meaning to them, not through the technology. And we're actually limiting the use of technology as well, mostly to to communication and research, just using features of the computer that the computer is actually good at. Enabling dialogue, like we're talking to each other at the moment. That sort of thing, and not beyond that, not for mindless gaming.
Okay, that's good. That sounds judicious. Of course, probably nobody's actually in favour of technology for its own sake, is it? So that's sort of a straw man that we're shooting down there. Also, you're quite right that we're using the word technology in the popular way to point to the internet, electronic devices, smartphones, that kind of thing. That's what I've been meaning when I said technology earlier. Of course, that's slightly wrong, because the Lego that I referred to is a technology, as is the pen that you showed us, and so on. They're all technologies too. And it's always really important to remember that technology is this broad spread of things. It's a continuum where the electronic ones is only one part of it. Let's turn to Jessica. If she's if her old MacBook is still chugging along, can you point us to, another thing is that people have said that I seem to be saying that we must have technological examples. I don't think we need to have technological examples, but maybe if there are some nice ones, it's nice to pick out, presumably there's a few where technologies can really be helpful and supportive for kids. So it would be nice if Jessica or Bo could mention one or two if they can.
Sure. The couple things that come to mind in terms of particular affordances, and I will talk about games here, because that was a big part of certainly our work at If You Can, and looking at, okay, so how do we build social skills, which are, as you mentioned, inherently about interacting with people live, into a tablet. So a couple things I think are very powerful here, and one of them is this idea of perspective taking. With a game and within a game world, we have this rich potential environment where children can perspective take, and they can try on different roles, put themselves in other kids' shoes, the shoes of other cultures, etc. And that's such a critical. We all know this, but that's such a critical 21st century skill when you look at our completely interconnected and digitized world. We now need learners and workers who can take the perspectives of others globally. So I think games, particularly role-play games, give us very rich environments for that. And even an example like Animal Crossing, Ian Bogost has talked about this in some of his writing, but that's a simple game, right? It's a simple game about you know, buying and selling, but it's really, when you go deeper, it's about a whole cultural system, and you're giving kids as young as 5 years old this ability to learn about that system and make decisions and kind of try it on, and not just perspective take, but perspective explore. So there's one example.
Okay, great. To do it's a slightly obvious antagonistic sort of question, but you know, parents are probably thinking, my kids do look at screens quite a bit at home, perhaps, and we try to do other things with them. But when kids go off to school, that's the time when you can be pretty sure they'll be doing face-to-face things, interacting with other kids. And here we seem to slightly be saying that it would be good to build in more screen-based things where kids get to sort of simulate relationships. Why not just get them just playing, role-playing, sort of these kind of scenarios with actual other children? What is the layer that technology adds, would you say?
Well, I think you make a good point, and I think that what we have in a technology or in a game world, let's take that example, is safety. We have safety. Like, kids can play out scenarios, and you know, another layer to this is this idea of forming their own identity, and you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the possible selves research, right? So I'll try to condense it, but essentially this idea that how we build our identities is kind of playing out scenarios of our future possible selves. And again, games give this rich environment where we can kids can make decisions, or adults for that matter, can make decisions and kind of go down the negative route and play out, ooh, this would be what life would look like, or what I would experience if I made a lot of bad decisions. And conversely, they can do that and make very positive decisions. And the balance of that has actually been shown in research to encourage healthy, positive decision making in children. So what you get in a game technology is the ability to, say, play out a lot of negative decisions and see their consequences without actually having to go through them. And experience those negative situations and repercussions kind of live. So that's one example that comes to mind.
That's great, thank you. I suppose that I was sort of thinking, isn't that just a thing that kids could do between themselves? But I suppose technology can add sort of layers of simulation which kids interacting with each other wouldn't necessarily think of, and could sort of take it on more steps. So I get that. Okay, thank you. He's from the Lego Foundation. The Lego Foundation does a lot of great charitable research work and charitable work and research about how we can transform learning, I know. And it isn't just about selling Lego products at all. But I know that it has a sort of starting point, which is that the basic brick is a really good way of learning. And here we're talking about digital electronic technologies which move quite a lot away from that. And we have to think about how you can marry these things two together. What do you think about that from the Lego Foundation perspective, Bo?
Well, first of all, I have to admit that maybe on the contrary to Jordan, I really find technology really exciting. And that's actually might be why they're relevant for education also, because they're usually novel. So when you talk about technology, it's something new, it's something that excites me, something that changes your approach to something. The other thing is that, and I'm really fascinated about technologies. I was spending some time as a researcher at MIT Media Lab and allow me to experiment with the range of these new technologies. But the critical one was the other point that Jordan also mentioned, that technology are really tools. So like the word technology means tools. And what we are really fascinated about in the foundation is, of course, technologies as tools to express yourself, to build and make yourself, and express the world around you. And the tools we see are important is new types of technologies like Makey, if you know that. It's basically inventing new interfaces to the computer. So you're allowed to turn everything into an interface, like anything from a banana to a table to your colleague. So these new types of technologies, new types of tools which allow you to explore the world, reinvent and make them, that's the way we get an understanding of the world and get an understanding of ourselves. And I think there's a deeper purpose to it, and I think that Jessica had a really good point when we talk about building thriving children. So technologies, and as Jordan mentioned, it has really a core purpose. If you think about the social disorders or attention disorders that people are really eager to find nowadays, find assessments for. If you think about children who are not motivated to go to school, not even in high school motivated anymore. If the depression is becoming an academic almost epidemic, it's like active physical exercise not here anymore. Like all the things that should be in place for good learning is really getting problematic right now. And I think there's different ways that technologies which allow you to express and make things basically can bridge that. So for me, technology is about excitement. It's about something novel, but it's about a tool that allow you to make things and bridging that physical and digital.
Okay, great, thank you. There's always that pause where I have to unmute myself. Okay, that's really interesting. I think we need to move on a little bit because our time is going by. One thing I thought would be really interesting to hear about is what role parents can play, because of course it's quite easy for us as adults to say what things may or may not be good for kids, but in our role as parents, also thinking about many people who are educators, but maybe we'll do that as a separate question. We'll do, first of all, as parents, it could be quite a simple short answer from each of you. What can parents do to support kids using technology to make it, something that's of great value and not just a distraction? And I'll ask, first of all, I'll ask Jordan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a fairly simple question for me. I think what parents need to do is they need to play with their kids, and that's the key. I mean, video games are one example that I write a lot about. Video games are fantastic for all the reasons that we've talked about, but it still requires a parent to step in and teach the kids how to make meaning out of that. And I'll back that up on Bo's last answer about technology as a way to build your world, right, or to build creative worlds. This is certainly true. Technology is to build your worlds, but that still means we need adults and we need parents to teach us about how to make the kinds of meaning at the same time. Now, I don't mean tell us how to make the meaning. I don't mean my job is to tell my kids what to make out of their Lego sets. But it should be my job to play creatively with them, right? So that they learn that I value that, right? So that I don't perpetuate this dichotomy where play is superficial or play is unimportant, and the work that I'm doing on the computer or reading the newspaper while they're playing with Lego sets is real life, and their play is not, right? I need to give them that constant feedback that this creative play is meaningful, and both when we're doing it with digital technologies and when we're doing it with analog technologies like Lego sets, right?
Yeah, great. So is it a matter of just, still with Jordan, is it a matter of just joining in, or sort of like if your kids are playing video games, is it just a matter of sort of taking interest, or is it good to like ask interested questions, or presumably that can go too far and you can just be like the nagging parent who's always going, oh, what's that thing? What are you moving now? What's happening? And it would just be annoying.
I mean, I think you already answered your question. I think both are important, but you also need to be aware of where that line is, and when you've become the nagging parent. Of course, sometimes being the nagging parent is a positive thing, right? Because you're enforcing that these are things that you find worth nagging about. Right? Like, I do nag my kids when they play violent games all the time. I don't necessarily make them stop playing them, but I do go, why do you want to play these? I don't understand. What's fun about killing, right? I'm not doing this to make them stop. I'm doing that so that they learn, so that dialogue becomes part of their dialogue while playing. So it becomes a critical dialogue where I'm self-reflecting on the kind of play that I'm doing, rather than the idea that I'm creating the limits. I want to create the conversation. I want to help teach them how to have critical conversations about their own play.
Ah, that's great. That makes sense. Thank you. We'll turn to Jessica, the role of parents.
Yeah, I think you're touching on, I think, such an important question here, and I'll take the kind of 60,000-foot view on my answer, which is that, when it comes to these skills and creating thriving children, I think that, if we don't have parents role modeling these skills, let's step away from technology for just a moment, then whatever we are teaching our kids through whatever devices, tablets, in the classroom, etc., we're not going to get very far. So I think, as educators and even culturally, I think we need, not just a shift in how we look at education, but really a culture shift. So a lot of parents out there, very educated parents, don't even know what social and emotional learning is. They don't even know that lingo. So I mean, when you kind of break it down, then they say, oh yeah, well of course, like empathy, I know what that is. But how are we, as a domain, helping and supporting parents to, not just, as Jordan says, play with their kids, right, and engage with them, which is so important, but also then go beyond that to model, what we want our kids to be learning, both through technology and beyond. And I think, there's some efforts afoot doing that now. I think Harvard and the Making Caring Common group has just put out, tips for parents to, how can they start kind of modeling the skills that we want our kids to learn to ultimately thrive. But I think when it comes to technology, honestly, that's kind of one of many areas in which we want parents to be role models. So for instance, a great example that always pops out at me is that we've got parents who want their kids to be good listeners, right? But they're looking at their text messages when they're talking to their kids. They're looking at their phone when they're talking to their children. Or, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's a really important practice to show parents, okay, what are the little things that they can do, even in regards to technology, to ultimately build them as role models.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds me of a thing that I got from Mark Runco about being a kind of role model of playfulness, and it means that you don't have to like show your kids how to play. Your kids already know how to play. It's not like you need to demonstrate what they should be doing with their toys, that kind of thing, because that's kind of pointless. But the idea about role modeling playfulness is just to be playful yourself in whatever way, in engaging with any kind of adult activity, or whilst cooking or fixing the car or something, the kind of playful attitude, which is an interesting form of role modeling, because it's not a thing where you're expecting somebody to copy you as such. It's a broader kind of way of showing a way of living and being. So I like that sort of idea. So we're still talking about what role parents can play. But as time goes by so quickly, I might move on to just asking single questions from the people who are watching this, because we've got a whole run of them now and getting single answers. But I'm interested in this thing about what parents can do. Let's turn to Jen.
So I think, one of the things that, and I'm sort of responding to some of the questions on the side as well, which is, I think what can parents do? It really depends as a society about what we're valuing, and what the schools can do in terms of technology, what parents can do, what society, should we be reimagining schools? Should we be reimagining the skills children need? I think that hasn't been established yet in terms of what we want children to be and what does thriving mean, and what thriving means to some, especially in the academic community, is different than at the individual parent level means. So I think it's really hard. I mean, I think you'd want parents to do all the things that are within their own value systems that support children's learning. And I think I always go back to, whether it's parents or educators or what technology can offer children, is this idea of the zone of proximal development. And I'll explain what that is, which is that you really grow. This is Vygotsky, one of the theorists in child development, but you really grow in your skill set, whatever skill set that is, when you're learning information that's a little bit difficult for you, but not so difficult that you're not going to be able to grasp it. So something just a little bit beyond your current level. So my example is, I'm a tennis player. I love playing tennis. If I go out and play tennis with Venus Williams or Serena Williams, I'm not going to get any better because they're going to slaughter me. So, but if I, go out with someone who's just a little bit better, I'm going to get better. If I keep playing people who are at my level, I'm not going to get better. And so I think the parents' role in helping children there is to really pose questions and to encourage children to think about things differently. Of course, monitoring and modeling is all very important, but I think we have to figure out what children are using technology for, what it's displacing. Is it displacing something that we think is more important? There's certain skills you can learn better from practicing it on a computer than you are taking a walk outside and looking at nature. Although if you want to learn about nature and get in your own head, that's a better activity. So I really think in terms of parents, it's in terms of what they want for their children, what they think their children get out of every experience that they have, whether it's technology-based or whether it's not, and really thinking about what's valued in society.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. We'll turn to Bo. I remember that Bo has got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I know that because I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So maybe drawing on personal experience, or maybe drawing on some of the extensive research LEGO Foundation has done. What do we think about what parents can do to support kids in their playful learning?
Well, that's certainly something we think a lot about in the foundation, and that's really what we're trying to build right now. And the most things we're focused on is try to come up with a range of meaningful activities which make sense for parents, but also are interesting for children. So that comes back to the role modeling also, and I think that is being mentioned several times, that this idea about engaging in meaningful critical discussions with technology is important. The second one on the hit list of productive ways of engaging parents in children's play is actually just observing. And it reminds me about Sukha Mitra's project of the grandmother cloud. Basically, the role of the grandmother is basically to sit there and observe and participate in a way that asking questions, what are you doing there, and why did you do that? So actually that kind of it's also very meaningful for children, and you begin to recognize actually what's happening in the vicinity of it. The third one, it's very important for us, is that the ability to provide opportunities for creative self-expression, and the opportunity to have materials and technologies to make and play with things. And I think that's increasingly critical, because we don't really reward original thinking. I think we are tending to think about technologies and about education as the fixed answer, and we don't really reward when children come up with something different than we expected. And that's even when you're sitting at a dining table trying to figure out what's in your cereal in the morning, or you're trying to mess up with the closet to figure out what clothes you want to wear. So as soon as you do something that is out of your comfort zone, which is actually pretty novel, we actually want to put children back into the system. So that idea about actually appreciating sometimes that creative behavior is appreciated and novel thinking is appreciated and rewarded is important. The way I increasingly thinking about it in my home is that I recognize that unstructured time actually needs to be structured. So usually we are extremely stressed in our working really high ambitions for what we want for ourselves and for our children, and we say actually we need to do this and this and this. But unstructured time, these pockets of time where you might get a little bored, but actually you have the opportunity to do stuff, but you don't really know what, but you're doing it together, is something you actually need to figure out how to structure into your life. And I think that's something we're increasingly doing right now, involving the children in figuring out what to do.
Okay, great. So it's in terms of the structure that's being applied there, it's just carved time when you are going to do something that you don't know what you're going to do. Is that right? That
exactly.
Okay. I thought you were going to come up with a kind of schedule of activities, but you don't mean that at all. You mean saving time to do stuff where you don't know what you're going to do, but you know you're going to do something. That makes sense. Like it. Okay.
And you're allowing the children to take the lead.
Yeah. So good, that leads nicely onto another thing I was going to ask, which is about putting kids in charge. But I haven't asked Jan yet about, so it would be good to come back to the role of parents in this. We'll do that first, and then we'll talk about kids taking an actual lead. Can you comment on what role parents can play, Jan?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting what you said earlier about that, parents can also engage in a playful way with technology. And I think that the trouble at the moment with a lot of parents is that they're somewhat scared of technology, and they're not therefore maybe scared of breaking it, or scared of what it could do to them or expose of them, and I think. I mean, the only reason why I got good at technology is because I'm not afraid of it. Actually, on the contrary, I really like technology, and so I'm not scared of breaking it. And I'm quite happy to try things out. And if they don't work, then the system enough to install it again, right? So, but I know how to do that. I know I can do that. And nothing that I can do with a bit of technology can actually break it. But mind you, I've broken a few pieces of technology, and they haven't recovered. but I'm not scared of it. And similarly, I don't think that kids are scared of technology. They just take it and they use it, and they figure out what they want to do with it, and they do it, and there's a disconnect.
That's one of the things that kind of defines the playfulness, I suppose. If you're just willing to have a go at stuff,
right?
You don't really care what happens.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think the best thing that any parent could do is just take an interest in what their kids are doing, and just play along with them, and find out, well, what is it that they're actually doing, and how can I engage with this thing? How can I be playful with it? And then that way there's an understanding that is generated that you can't get from just maybe you're reading an article about the game that your kid is playing, rather than picking up the controller and playing it yourself. I think that's a much better thing to do, and that way you can get closer to your kids as well, because you understand what they're doing by doing it yourself. And you can you can have an informed discussion about what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's great. I'm going to make it so we go a bit faster through topics now by not actually asking the same question to 5 or 6 people that we've got here, but I'll just throw out a few things, and if anybody's got something to say, you can unmute yourself and jump in and say it, okay? So we'll do that from now on. There's a good point in the comments that, let me just scroll up, is up here from Jim Salmons, who's one of the pace setters in the Ashoka Reimagine Learning Challenge. And he makes this point that basically we're talking a lot about schools and kids. And that's what often happens when you talk about play and learning. Then people talk about schools and kids. And that's the point that I like to make as well, that it shouldn't always be about schools and kids. When you talk about play, why is it always about kids? Play is something that can be done by anybody, all adults, all kids. And similarly, learning, of course. It's well known, the idea of lifelong learning and so on these days. Learning isn't just something where we have to think about. So, has anybody got anything to say about the role which technology can play, or maybe technology is transforming things, or failing to transform things, for learners, or for adults becoming more playful? Either of those.
All right. Well, I can give you a good example out of my school experience in Germany, but specifically in Berlin. Because the government here has recently put quite a lot of money into supplying schools with computers and infrastructure like smart boards, those interactive whiteboards that they have at school, and computers and tablets, but very little in terms of how to use those bits of technology. They're just there, and there's no instruction really on how to use them. There's no software that people might find useful, and a lot of teachers struggle to find use for them. And the deal with the smartboards often is that, well, you can have this fancy smartboard in your classroom, but you have to give up your old blackboard. And so, now many teachers are scared that when the smartboard breaks down, they haven't got anything to write on. And for that reason, they reject the technology, and also because they think it's creating too much extra work for me. There's nobody is telling me how to use it. I don't know how to use it. I have to put in all this how to use it, so I'm going to stick with the blackboard. And that's the attitude that many teachers take here, and the attitude that the Senate takes, on the other hand, is we just throw technology at the schools, and we just pour computers in the top of the building and hope that knowledge will come out at the bottom, and of course that's not how it works.
Yeah, so we've got to support adults to be able to deal with that stuff as well as
I think that's where most of the problems lie at the moment, because the kids know how to use technology most of the time. A lot of teachers don't.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you for that. But the point was to move away from talking about schools and children. So has anyone got a thing about technology supporting adults to be either more playful or to learn better? And it could be a good or bad point. Any thoughts? We don't think about adults learning or being playful.
Well, I think David, this is part of what I was getting at when I used the Google Hangout as an example of a tool for learning. I also kind of think the question is the answer to an earlier question, which was about which you asked about why not just do these things in person, right? Why put the screen in the school if they're already doing these things in a school? And it's because these technologies are also being used outside the school, and so it's important to both contextualize the use inside and out. I teach in a college classroom where I very often use Twitter for the simple reason that I want to teach them how to have a critical conversation, an intellectual conversation on Twitter, rather than just tweeting, gossip. So it's the idea, and moving that, because that's play, right? Intellectual. I mean, Bo said it earlier that learning is play. I would also say that's why we say that intellectuals play with ideas, right? Real thinking is always about something playful. It's always about a kind of ideological sandbox where you throw things around and see what you can build.
Yeah, no, that's good, and I like that thing of connecting what happens inside a place of learning with what happens outside a place of learning. And of course, we're all always learning wherever we are, so it's silly to have these kind of distinctions between the place of learning and the other places. So, good one. There was that thing I did want to ask about how we can put children more in charge of this, because here we all are just looking along the row. I think we're all like over 30, it's fair to say. Don't want to upset anybody. Well, over 30. Grown-up people who've been to university and thought about all these kind of things, and then we're coming up with suggestions at the very least about the role that technology can play in kids' lives or whatever. How can we put children in the driving seat of this? Children have at least some good ideas about what's going to be good for their learning. Many good ideas, I should think. How can we make it so they can actually get those ideas into the stuff that, essentially adults do end up providing the environments for learning and providing tools and resources, because we've got more resources than kids normally. So how can we get kids to be more in the driving seat so they can really take a leading role in this instead of just, receiving, consuming, and using stuff that we've given to them? Anybody can join in.
Bo, are you jumping in here? You go first.
Well, thank you. I think the first thing to recognize is that the future is something to create and make, and it's something we can imagine. And I think if we imagine new things and are allowed to come up with ideas, everyone is kind of on the same level. If adults have a fixed idea of how the world should look like, that's why we limit the opportunities and children become kind of the second place. But usually when we also do simple workshop with Lego, it's basically finding that space where novelty is allowed to come up with how do you think the challenge should be solved, how do you think about the future, how do you want to learn, and so forth. So actually, imagination, that process is a way to set a common ground. I think in general, I think that's also based on following the interests of children. I think that's something, it goes all the way back to how schools were originally thought in Reggio Emilia also, that how teachers would actually really into understanding what motivated children, what background did they have in their family, and nowadays with technologies we really have the opportunity to provide rich projects, to be more project based, where each child allows to find their own unique role, own unique contribution in resolving a project. So I think the confidence in that we can create the future, think about big ideas and big challenges, and allow the projects to emerge out of that, and then facilitate these projects. I think that's a good starting point.
Okay, excellent. So Jessica very generously gave way there, so we'll turn to Jessica on this one. It's about how kids can take charge. Of course, it's ironic that we've got still a bunch of us adults talking about how kids can take charge, but we're going to ignore that and carry on anyway with some thoughts.
Well, I think that you know, what my kind of answer to this question also links last topic about the formal versus informal space. So one of the I'll call it a movement or an initiative that I feel is really taps into both of these is something called connected learning, which all of you may know about. But this idea of, you know, in the real world, kids are not just learning in the classroom, and we need to acknowledge that. So, you know, connected learning kind of connects what are children's interests outside the classroom, like what are they fired up about, what are they doing and what do they want to do, technology, which is a natural interest point for them, and then their peers, which again, you know, as Jordan mentioned, you know, what are they doing on Twitter, you know, what are they doing with their peers, like what's fun for them. And the role of the educator or the role model or the facilitator or the parent is then to connect those three different areas to either academic learning, you know, some kind of career-based pursuit, or some kind of civic-minded pursuit. And I think that this is a really interesting you know, I think this is a really interesting direction, and I think we must acknowledge it, because kids are no longer, I mean, they're making videos, they're in this participatory world with technology that they may be learning far more outside the classroom than in the classroom. And so, you know, as educators, I think we have to, I think our role is to really say, okay, how do we pull all that together, not how do we, you know, push that out and then do something different in the classroom. So I don't know if that directly answered your question, but that's one. I feel as though if I had to look 10 years down the road, we're going to have to. That's going to be where we're at, because it's kind of following the natural drives of children and of learners.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. And I saw also Jen waved her hand at this thing about how kids could take charge. So I don't know if you've got a point on that, Jen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for preschooler, you know, many preschools are set up where it's child-directed learning. And so if children exhibit interest in something, the teachers start providing content for them. At Sesame, we explain the term expertise to 3- and 4-year-olds, and we explain that they're the experts and we need their help. And they're they very easily tell us when they like something or what they don't like. And I think so much of it is about tapping into children's natural play patterns, the kinds of things that they're interested in. It's not just about giving them an app or giving them a game and just asking them, what do you think of this? It's sort of just spending time with children, whether it's older children, and really getting a sense of what they like, what they're curious about, the kinds of questions that they ask, and then trying different things and seeing what they think about it. So I think engaging children in this process throughout anything that you create, I think, is critical.
Yeah, okay, thank you, that's good. That sort of ties with the thing that I'm trying to stir in some of the comments we've received online at the same time. There's a comment from Jessica Lahaye, who says, another thing that I never hear mentioned is about how tech and learning is about the relationships that can be built whilst playing together. She says she's got 2 kids 5 years apart, and playing a game together gives them common ground and something to do together where they do actually bond around doing it. So that's example of relationships being built, rather than the maybe more common discourse that we have about basically technology destroying relationships because we think of it as a sort of isolated, single screen-based thing. There's also a comment about which basically says, how can technology be good for children when it keeps them from playing outside? I wonder if, as you know, in 10 years' time, maybe technology will just be a thing that is outside just as much as it is inside, digital technology. And but maybe then we think that's just going to ruin the experience of being outside. Anybody got a thought on that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
The thing, one of the things that we noticed when we were trialing Professor S in the classroom is that because you see the teacher actually slips into the role of Professor S and communicates with the kids on a completely different level than they would if they're talking to them in the classroom. And so all these individuals in the classroom communicate through this platform and are part of this game. Essentially, the whole classroom is turned into a game platform. And the way in which they talk to each other is so interesting because the conversations happen that wouldn't normally happen in the classroom. And many teachers that played Professor S have noticed that they actually got to know the children. They feel like they've got to know the kids that they teach for the first time because they divulge, personal details about themselves, and they talk about things that happen outside the classrooms, things that happen in the schoolyard and at home, and they also through this conversation steer what happens in the classroom ultimately, because often they suggest things. Well, we really enjoyed playing this game. Can we do this again? Or when they record their little video essays, often they're tasked with recording a little video essay about, I don't know, Wales or road traffic rules. They come up with things that then suggest ways for the teacher to steer the teaching in a different direction, because they realize, okay, so here's something that we need to look at in more detail, or there's a skill in this child that they never realized was there because it doesn't come to play in a normal classroom situation. It's a very intimate, very human experience, this game.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sounds nice. There's a comment from Anne Glick from One Globe Kids, maybe suggesting a kind of more global perspective, who says, are the important things of life just learned outside of school nowadays? In the virtual world, she asks, learning outside of school. Maybe she's kind of saying we're talking about schools too much. But if you take it to more of an extreme, might it be that could we sort of say that if you're anywhere in the world where you've got access to the internet, does that open up a world of learning which is just different and transformative, and we don't even need to really think about schools now? We can just think about what things can be provided to kids digitally? Or would we be uncomfortable about that? Anybody want to come in on that one? Is it a kind of global problem solver in terms of giving us access to potential learning?
So in our projects in the foundation, I think we are facing a range of very, very different schools. So from like upper middle class schools in the Western world to really low poverty schools in South Africa, for example. And schools have extremely different functions. In some places, in particular in Africa and India, these are really the only place that children are trusted. They get healthy, they get food, they get some kind of manipulatives themselves. But in general, I think schools are really thought of as part of communities. And I think if we lose that kind of sense that schools are actually, and teachers are actually in synchrony with parents around the discussion with the children, if you don't bring in the expertise of the community in having good, interesting activities at the school, I think we're losing that role of the school. And there's a tendency towards schools becoming more standardized, becoming more global, also with the standardized assessments. But if you look at High Tech High, for example, they're really benefiting from being connected to the community. So I definitely think there's a big social function in doing that. The technologies aspect, I think, come into being now with what David, what you really know something about also with the communities of practice, because technologies allows you to bring expertise in on certain topics that you want to explore. So connecting with people, if you really have a deep interest in doing certain parts of gaming or sewing or programming or fixing your bike. So of course technologies allow to bring these interests across communities, which are not necessarily where you are, but they complement each other in a really really elegant way, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. I asked a sort of deliberately stupid and naive question in the hope that you would give us an interesting answer. That was interesting. I like the thing about schools as part of communities. That also seems to be kind of parallel with the role of libraries in communities, because, you know, people increasingly say, you know, people don't need books anymore, or if they are reading books, they get them digitally. What's the point of a library? And the interesting thing is to rethink what a library means within a place, and it's to do with community and bringing people together and a place where ideas are shared, which is a, you know, it's a distinctive thing which you can't just do simply because everybody's got access to Wikipedia. That is part of the problematic discourse, isn't it? About, like, you know, I love Wikipedia and it's great, but sometimes some of the propaganda around Wikipedia, say, is that now, you know, anybody with access to the internet has just got all this knowledge, so it's kind of like problem solved. They've got knowledge now, but they might have access to knowledge, but it's having the tools to deal with that knowledge, to think critically, to sort out, as Jordan said earlier, what things might be useful for you and what things might be less than useful for you. All this kind of critical thinking, coming together, sharing ideas, talking about ideas with other people, that's what you still need, and is a great role for any place of learning, not necessarily a school, might be a community centre or a library or whatever, but it's still really important to get people together, isn't it? Good.
Yeah, and David, can I also say something about, I want to back up right on this question to Jessica Lahi's question that we kind of went right over, and this great question about how using technology doesn't just connect you to other people using the technology, but the people in the room with you. In my household, there's 2 boys that are 7 and 9, and they certainly play video games really well together. In fact, there's many more fights over their Lego sets than there are video games, and I think part of that is because they have kind of a personal investment in building a creative thing in a different way, that they get really angry if someone else messes it up. And we're often working on teaching that that's the cool thing about Lego, is that they can come apart. But I also, when they're playing video games, it's a really collaborative thing together. And this, we have to give some credit to the Nintendo Corporation that doesn't get enough these days, because every game they build now has what's called cooperative mode. And it's no longer a competitive 2-player game, but it's a cooperative 2-player game where both are working together towards the same goals. And in my house, there's often all 3 of us playing that game together, but myself included. But they are playing, and they're learning to talk, and they're learning to talk about the game. And also this gets involved in what I was saying about parents playing with the kids, is I'm often teaching them through modeling how to talk to each other about what's happening, right? And that is important. And then, of course, it also happens in the virtual world. I'm thinking about Minecraft, which, of course, is this gigantic phenomenon, and my sons spend a ton of time playing Minecraft on servers with people all over the world. And this kind of live, it's almost social media, but social virtual worlds where they've created their own economies even inside this. And I used to think I could limit which video games he was playing, and then I discovered he just finds Minecraft versions of them. So where some kid has created a Minecraft version of the game his parents won't let him play, and the kids play. I think this is a beautiful, wonderful thing. But I also think what happens in Minecraft, to answer the second question about the outside life, is at least, and I don't know how true this is in the rest of the world, but in the United States, kids get very little outside play because we're so terrified of what can happen. Especially, I live in an urban setting. You know, my kids get some outside play, but not like I did, where we wander the neighborhood. That doesn't feel possible in the world anymore. And I discover that they create that world inside Minecraft. They create this world of playing with each other in this kind of unlimited space. But again, it's not just, it's a space with very clear structured rules, right? It's not a space of just free, open space. So, it's structured, unstructured play, to use the language that Bo used, which I think is really important. Do we? And I'll go back to another question you asked. I know I'm covering like 6 at once here, which is how do we let them take the lead? And I kind of question whether we even want kids to take the lead. We want to structure places for them to be empowered to lead themselves, but we want to eliminate this notion, I think, altogether of who are the leaders and who are the followers. This kind of where my kids and I work together, and I do what I'm better at than them, which is creating facilitated structures. They do what they're better at than me, which is not being caught up in all the things they've learned for 36 years about what's the right way to do it. So that becomes something we do together. One of us is not leading the other. We're collaborating, and in that sense, all of these things are creating communities and creating community skills that allow us to then bring those and the play spaces and into the really big play space, which is the world at large.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. I was going to ask a question about making things together and creativity. Then I thought to myself, I'm going to have to say, you're not allowed to mention Minecraft. Then you did mention Minecraft just there, so that's why I laughed as soon as you said Minecraft, because Minecraft is obviously the answer to that question. But if the answer is not allowed to include Minecraft, Minecraft exists, that's great, that's good. But beyond Minecraft, when kids are playing together, when anybody's playing together, when the thing where basically you're making stuff together. We've mentioned Lego, it doesn't have to be Lego, but anything where you're sort of getting physical stuff and putting it together. That seems like a really distinctive and pleasurable and sort of connective way of playing. And I was going to ask, do you ever get that using digital technologies? And part of the answer is, yeah, Minecraft. Apart from Minecraft, have we got any other answers? Or am I basically right for this conservative sounding idea that you can't really do that in digital media? It's not necessarily conservative, is it? It might just be realistic. Anybody?
Yeah, no, you can actually get physical things in digital games, and Professor S is actually a great example because we put a big emphasis not just on digital media. I mean, obviously, Professor S is a story that's got video content and a social element where people can talk to each other and consume films and games and things, but also what's unique about it is that you can send things, using this marvelous time portal device here. It's got a little capsule inside it, and you can send through this capsule, you can send physical objects through time and space, which then appear in the classroom, or vice versa, appear in Professor S' time laboratory. We have lots of sort of pre-recorded video content where the children are, for example, tasked with repairing the Professor S glasses, and so they get a broken pair of glasses through the time portal, and they have to repair it for him because he can't see, and then they put it inside the machine, and send it through time and space so he can see again. And so there are lots of these like little projects that actually take place in the real world, and not just in the classroom, but also on the schoolyard, at home, in the library. So we're trying to send them places and give them little quests to do in the real world, because after all, many of the skills that we need are not readily acquired online, but actually require you to go out there and get your hands dirty. Like, the big chunk of the curriculum in the 4th grade, for example, is about learning how to ride your bicycle responsibly and also maintain it. And so there's a big chunk dedicated to bicycle maintenance, and so they get little tools through the time portal with and quests about how do you repair your bike when the chain comes off? Can you show us? Can you give us a little pointer? And that's a big chunk of what we do. The digital technology really takes a backseat in most of what happens in Professor S.
Okay, thanks. That's really neat. I think this is probably going to be our last question, because we do need to stop at the allotted time of half past whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. And we've got a question from our 5th graders. We have some 5th graders watching, which is really nice. And at Cunningham Elementary, they've got a question, which is it's a really good question, actually. I've been looking down the questions. This is like the best question. The question is, what is the most challenging part of creating an educational game? They have a Changemaker school, one of the Ashoka Changemaker schools. The question is, what's the most challenging part of creating an educational game? That sounds like a good question. Who's willing to take that one?
I would love to jump in on this one because I travel all over the place talking to game makers about how to address this. And I'll tell you what the hardest part about it is. The question is, how do you build a game where the learning is part of the mechanics of the game, right? So what we tend to do is, because we have this education paradigm where the teacher stands in the front of the room and goes, here's what 1 + 1 is, now memorize it, we tend to immediately start building games that way. So what you get are, I always use the metaphor that they're not games, they're just quizzes with nice animated spaceships to tell you got it right, or gong sounds to tell you got it wrong. That's not a game. That's a quiz with good animations. But when the game is good, then it's the mechanics themselves. So in order to learn the subject, in order to win the game, in order to play the game, in order to have fun with the game, you have to understand the subject matter. And there are some fantastic examples of this. The example I often give is Dragon Box, which is a game, a tablet game made to teach algebra. And really, it's just algebra. All that the creator did was replace all the numbers and variables with pictures, right? And teach you that the rules of the game are to move the pictures in this way, right? And so in order to succeed, in order to play in this world, right, you have to know how it works. I mean, when we play any game, and again, since I see Bo's face, I keep thinking of Lego as my example. Lego, in order to learn to play Legos, I need to learn how they work. I need to learn how they connect and how they build upon one another. And if you can embed in these things the learning, embed into the game itself, so that the way it works, the way the sandbox works, is the lesson. That's when they work the best, and that's actually the only way they work as games. Other than that, you're just doing, maybe more fun quizzes, right? Jeopardy's a really fun quiz, but it's still just a quiz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Anyone else on that one?
Piggyback on that, when we were creating the If game, one of the more exciting, parts of that experience was really creating a game with folks that had created some of the most engaging games in the world, like Madden football. Because I think, as Jordan rightly says, the struggle in the learning game space has really been, okay, we're learning, but are we having fun? Are we really creating an engaging experience? Like, if a child were to go home and have 100 media choices, would they choose this game? And certainly for any kind of consumer learning game, that's something to consider. The level of fun needs to be really high, which I think speaks to the, kind of critical need to have an interdisciplinary team at the table. So you have to have really fun game makers and, deep learning experts, both working together.
Lovely. We've got time for one more answer on this great question. The most challenging part of creating an educational game?
Well, so certainly our most important challenge right now is to get games into real and back into games again. So the coupling between physical and digital. And it comes back to the previous discussion about physical and exercise and so forth. It's really critical for us that actually children have the opportunity to move around and touch things and intuitively tinker with things. So of course, the best solution right now that the company is trying to do is to invent new forms of interactions by building things in physical and then having different scanning devices that you basically try to embed the digital bricks into reality. But really thinking about the ways that physical interactions inform a game. And the second challenge I see is the social aspects. Being able to especially what Jordan talks about, creating a game where you actually are allowed to collaborate on a very simple systems level, so you can share ideas, learn from each other, try out and experiment. because if that works, then you get the fun works and the level of challenge works, and you get inspired. So so two things we find challenging.
Okay, lovely, thank you. There's a second question from the 5th graders, and I was going to take it. I think we're running out of time now, so thank you, Jen, for sticking your hand up, but we're going to have to wind up, I think. The other thing the 5th graders wanted to say was, how would you explain the difference between TV and video games in terms of educational potential? Is one better than the other? I'll just do my answer to that to be quick. I think it's to do with interacting, to use that rather corny word. It's to do with having something to do. TV may suggest things that you can do. You think your own thoughts in relation to what's on TV, but basically it's a kind of one-way medium. And the good thing about any kind of well-designed toy or game is that you get to do something with it using your own brain, interacting with some materials or parts and some of the humans together to do something interesting. So that's kind of the potential which I think video games and any other kind of useful resource or technology have, which TV doesn't have so much of. That'd be my answer. I'm just trying to feed in an answer there for the kids from Cunningham Elementary, who were glad they joined us. We're glad everybody else joined us too. I have to thank Ashoka Changemakers and the Lego Foundation, who organised all of this. In particular, Marzina from Changemakers. She's done a really great job pulling together this really great panel. Look, they're all doing the nice clapping thing. I'll say thank you going along the line that I've got on my screen to Jordan, Jessica, Jen, Jan, and Bo. You've all been excellent today and made really interesting comments. Really enjoyed having this discussion. I've got some new things to think about there. So thank you all for joining us, and good evening, good morning, or good night.
Thank you. See you.